The ore that made an empire. This yellow stone or piece of rock is iron ore, more specifically iron ore from Bergslagen in the region of Dalarna in Sweden. This is a type of ore that made history and made the regions of upper inland middle Sweden into a center for mining and metallurgy. Mining and metallurgy that has been practiced for a long time in the region. At large scale in the Middle Ages, but even earlier, as we do have indications of mining and metallurgy in what is Scandinavian prehistoric times in this area of the Scandinavian peninsula. So mining and metallurgy has been practiced here for a long time. And the region of Dalarna has historically been famous for its metals and also the hardy folk working the metal in the area and the mines. The closeness to the metals found here also meant that the people of Dalarna historically have been known for being well armed, as they could easily get access to the metals and make weapons for themselves, and thus the price of weapons around here was not as high as elsewhere. And consequently, the availability of weapons was higher here. And many people around here had weapons openly. There is also the name of a famous Swedish knife called the Mora knife. Mora being a city in the region of Dalarna, north of where I am currently. And the knives like these used to be carried around by everyone around here in Dalarna, in public space in the past. Though, due to the knife laws in Sweden, this is now illegal. Though despite the laws, people still carry around knives a lot around here. In the pre-industrial age, outright weapons of war, like swords, axes and spears, were usually kept and carried around by individuals in the open here too, which was not the case in the rest of Sweden. The availability of weapons also meant that people in Dalarna largely had a greater independence versus the centralized elites of Sweden, which meant that the nobility was generally weaker in Dalarna than elsewhere, and that Dalarna, at several points in its history, either started rebellions or were the centers of rebellions against the crown. This independent spirit, together with a long history of being valued soldiers in the various armies of the various kings of Sweden, together with the hardiness associated with working the mines and working metal, is also the reason as to why the term Dalakarl, literally a man from Dalarna, is also a term used for describing a manly man in Swedish. And this is also the reason as for why the so-called father of Sweden, Gustavosa, fled to this area of Dalarna when he planned his rebellion against Christian the Tyrant. It was due to the people of Dalarna's reputation as tough men and as men that were armed and could fight for him. And considering that Gustavosa managed to win his rebellion against Christian II and became king in 1523, he was probably correct in seeking the help of the people of Dalarna. Though he would spend considerable time later actually fighting against rebellions that were started in Dalarna. Several rebellions. But speaking about the Vasa dynasty generally, during the Vasa dynasty and especially during Gustav Adolphus II, peoples such as the Wallons, Germans and various other groups of people would be invited to work in the metal production and metal refinement, connected to the mining that occurred here in the middle of Sweden. These people brought into Sweden in the 17th century were not brought in mostly as miners, but as refiners and experts in smelting techniques and in high quality steelmaking from the iron produced in the mines. Before this wave of immigration, most of the iron produced in the mines had simply been shipped down away from Sweden to be refined elsewhere. The Vasa dynasty wanted to keep the entire process within the domain of Sweden, so they invited people that were experts in refining iron into steel in order to increase the high quality steel production in the area. The immigration of these foreigners into Sweden due to the mining industry found here was so large that it even influenced the Swedish language. And a lot of our loan words coming from French has their origin in this immigration. And Swedish already had large amounts of German loan words into the language even before this immigration, but got even more during this wave of immigration as well. And all of this was due to this ore, because you have to understand that this ore was the foundation for a center of large-scale production of steel and other metals that were sold to the entirety of Europe on an international scale, where the mining found here in the middle of Sweden was among the greatest in the entirety of the world. The mining here was the economic engine of what was to become the Swedish Empire in the 17th to the 18th century, and the landscape here in Dalarna was dotted by huge mines everywhere, but also small local mines and mine shafts, like these ones, though these are later from the 18th century, but mines like these are found in the area all around and all over middle Sweden, and especially here in Dalarna. Mines that produced enormous amounts of metal. And still on the subjects of various metals. You might be wondering why the water here is green or turquoise. And I can tell you, my viewers, that this is not due to algae growth, at least not mainly, but due to another thing, the presence of copper. Oxidized copper has given this water this color. And copper was one of the metals that were mined heavily in this area and elsewhere in Dalarna. Copper was just as an important metal as iron, and also taken heavily from this area and elsewhere. On the subject of copper and the size of mining that I mentioned before, there is a mine with the name of Falu koppargruva, Falun copper mine, which is just outside of the town or city of Falun, here in Dalarna, though it is quite a bit away from where I am currently, though. But Falun copper mine is pretty much the Swedish version of the mines of Moria from the Lord of the Rings, and is Europe's largest hand-mined mine, and a mine I intend to make a video about in the future, because that place is huge. Believe me, the mining network is huge, and still parts of it is open to the public to this very day to visit. And I can really recommend visiting that place, because it really gives you an appreciation of history and of the enormous work that went into mining in the past. And once again, this enormous mine that was a copper mine was just part of a larger system of mines all over the middle of Sweden in an enormous production system. A production system that would be the basis not only for producing the weapons that would create the Swedish imperial period of great empire, but also be the basis for the economy that would be the backbone of the Swedish Empire. And of later, as in the 19th to the 20th century, the metals mined here would be central in the industrialization process of Sweden. The mining here would be the basis for the steel that would be used in the shipbuilding and car manufacturing of Sweden. And in the 20th century, the trade of steel with Germany in both the First and Second World Wars ensured that Sweden could remain without German invasion, all due to the steel coming from the mining industry, and which Germany depended upon and could not risk losing by declaring war. So this ore ensured Swedish peace in a way. From the middle of the 20th century and later, mines would close down due to various reasons related to everything from environmental issues and regulations preventing mines from operating, and to economical reasons that were caused by higher wages and more competition from abroad. This would cause a lot of unemployment and poverty and social issues in the area where I am currently, and also in the greater region of Dalarna. And honestly, the area, though it is on the road of recovery in my own personal view of it, it's still a matter of a fact that it still bears the scars of the collapse of the mining industry around here. For example, you can still see areas that are more or less ghost towns of abandoned villages and the like in certain parts of Dalarna. And Dalarna, and especially the area of Dalarna, where I am currently, has a lot of social issues as well that stem from the closing down of the mines around here. Something which people that live outside of Dalarna might not really understand when it comes to issues that are associated with this region and this part of history, which I might make a future video about, detailing more. Do the history of the closing down of the mines here in Bergslagen, together with the social consequences of these shutdowns of the mines, some of which I've personally seen myself, are part of a very depressive part of history. For me personally. Though on a more positive note, there have been arguments and discussions about reopening some of the mines around here, or starting new mines. So mining could come back to the region of Bergslagen and the greater region of Dalarna, opening a new chapter with regards to this ore and the mining of it. And this was a little bit about the history surrounding this ore and its importance historically. And I hope you found it interesting. Please do subscribe, as it would help the channel spread awareness about the humanities.
اشتركوا بالقناة من فضلكم.